Hey, good morning, everybody. We are in the second letter of Peter, Second Peter, and chapter 2. And we remember that Peter is writing this from a Roman prison. And in fact, this is his last letter. You might call it his farewell letter because he's about to be martyred at the hands of Nero in Rome. And you might remember from chapter 1 that Peter tells them a couple of really important things. He says, number one, he says, God has given you everything you need for this life through the death and resurrection of Jesus. And the second thing he says, in response to what God has done for you, he said, stay close to God, stay close to Jesus, persevere in godliness, because he says you're going to need all the strength that you can get to work through these difficult times. Now, in chapter 2, he starts right out and identifies that there's false teachers among them. Peter warns that their teaching as well as their lifestyle are absolutely toxic. Let's look at verse 2. It says, many will follow their evil teaching and shameful immorality. And because of these teachers, the way of truth will be slandered. In their greed, they will make up clever lies to get hold of your money. But God condemned them long ago, and their destruction will not be delayed. Peter reminds them that God can and God will punish gross wickedness and rebellion. And he reminds them with two examples from the Old Testament, two examples of where divine justice was rendered. The first one is from Genesis chapter 6. And he reminds them about some rebellious angels that apparently invaded Earth and then slept with human women. And it was God saw the extent of this as being horribly evil, and he determined that they needed to be destroyed. But God looked around and he saw Noah and his family. And Noah, as the verse goes, found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And because of that, because of their faithfulness, God delivered them from the great flood that took place. And Peter also identifies the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah. God brought judgment on these defiant and ungodly people, but God spared Lot, who was a righteous man. Remember, in each case, there was a rebellion against God and a great evil that was identified, and God chose to deal with it on the spot with divine judgment. But God spared and delivered those who were faithful. Faithful doesn't mean perfect. Faithful just means those who were seeking after God. Now, we move on to verses, starting with verse 12. And Peter returns to talking about these false teachers, and he gets even more pointed. These people are not only living destructive and immoral lifestyles, but they're also trying to convince others to do the same. Convince others that God doesn't care about how they live. They claim that adultery is fine. Greed is a perfect way of life. In 2 Peter 2:19, it says this, they promise freedom, but they themselves are slaves to sin and corruption. But you are a slave to whatever controls you. Peter says that they incorrectly used this concept of Christian freedom to justify living in this perverse sort of way. Christian freedom is not a license to sin. The Apostle Paul talks about this all the time. It's freedom from life-destroying slavery to sin. That's what Peter says. We're freed to live an obedient life, to faithful life in the power of Christ. Peter adds that these teachers are not free at all. In fact, they're slaves to their sinful bodily impulses. They've been deceived, and now they're trying to deceive others into this same destructive lifestyle. And because they have this high calling of being a teacher, God is going to hold them doubly accountable. So what's our takeaways for today? First of all, it's a very simple one. Don't destroy your life by living in slavery to sin. Jesus went to the cross to pay the price for our sin. And he was resurrected to set us free, to live in his purpose for us. And the second one is if we're teachers, then make sure we're teaching God's truth. You and I have been entrusted with a high calling, if we're teachers, of pointing others to Christ. Stay close to Jesus by reading his scriptures and by being with other Christians. That'll keep us strong in what God wants us for us today. I pray that you have a wonderful day today and stay close to Jesus. Bye-bye.
If these devotional videos are helpful to you, subscribe to our channel and click the notification button so you know when we post a new video. And of course, please share them with others.